Okay, if we could invite you to please stand with us before we begin the meeting. And Russ is going to lead us in a word of prayer and a flag salute.
Let's pray. Lord, we just want to stop now and tell you how thankful we are for you, and just tell you that we love you and give you praise and honor and glory for everything in our lives. Lord, I pray you would guide us in our decisions today, the choices we have to make, and that everything we do is pleasing to you. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I believe everybody received the agenda and the minutes, so we will open for a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Is this
opposed?
the minutes from last time?
No, this is the agenda.
The agenda,
Yes,
not the minutes.
correct.
Right.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No.
Let the record show that Horst is opposed to the approval of the minutes.
Is there something wrong with the minutes?
Well, I'm glad to tell you.
Well, I think he should be given the opportunity, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, in the minutes, this time, as in last time, I wasn't there. I showed up as a vote, but I engaged Veronica Hurst on their proposal for the motor, and she actually gave us some facts. The fact is that it's a Wankel engine, as Jim C. knew during the Skype call, and that they, excuse me? Okay, I'm just watching your body language. And we still don't have the motor. We've asked now for a year. The Skype call was conducted November 2012, and still there is no motor. No. That should have shown up in the minutes. And the question about diesel, now their statement was made, no diesel, that they never intended it, and the motor runs on industrial fuel. Well, that wasn't defined. And I looked into, let me just read it. I can't find it right now, but it says, you can find on YouTube that the Wankel motor is inefficient, wastes fuel, and is not, and they specifically say, not a green motor. And that's shown in the research conducted on Google. These are relevant things that should have been in the minutes.
Okay, thank you for sharing with us,
Yes,
Horst.
it was a pleasure.
We'll move on with the Hunter Engineering proposal to provide civil engineering services for Floor Can.
You have in your packet the engineering proposal for the Floor Can site. I need board approval in order to move forward.
Unless anybody has any problem with it, I'll move that we accept this.
So we have a motion offered by Donald to accept the proposal to provide civil engineering services. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from citizens? If not, it's been motioned and seconded, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll move on to the USF performance report.
We weren't sure exactly how to treat this morning. I would like to have a workshop with the board and have the folks from Impact Data and USF either meet with us or call in. We had tried to set that up today, but it just wasn't working out well. I hate to encumber you with a second meeting, but I think that the ability to understand multiplier effects of economic development is very integral to what we do. So I'm going to suggest that we try to set up a workshop, maybe with a couple of other items sometime prior to the end of the year, and to simply just acknowledge the report today.
Is there any reason why they're not here today?
Well, not particularly, other than it was just, Impact Data is in Texas, and travel schedules were just difficult for us to do, so no particular reason, nothing sinister.
Is this the report that they were here as a group, what, 8 months ago or 6 months ago, or what it was, and give us the parameters of what they were gonna do? Is this that report?
This is a little different than that. That USF had done a phase 1 of a study, and they have come back with us with a proposal for a phase 2 that we have not implemented yet. Impact Data was the assessment of the projects that had occurred from 2006 to 2011.
Okay, because I remember when they were here as a group, to me, what the scope of work they were gonna do was totally different than this. And that's a totally different
Yes.
report
Yes.
than what this is.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and we've already paid for this then, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you saved yourself a bunch of time today. And I had a bunch of questions about this thing. Okay.
If you'd like to come by and see
Long
me.
as this is different than what they said they were gonna do here 6, 8 months ago, whenever it was, you know. When they said it was round table. and I
The
asked
other
them-
proposal, as I recall, was around $250,000, and we have not acted on that.
Okay, all right, that's, I was thinking that this report was that report that they said they were gonna do a scope of work about kind of giving us a direction of where we need to go. And, this here did not even come even close to that, okay. All right, as long as it's different,
It is.
all right. I'm good.
So then the office will send us out some dates for November, December.
Yes.
Okay, RFP for accounting services.
As you recall, we had hired Wicks Brown under a temporary arrangement. We now have a formal agreement to advertise request for proposal for accounting services, and it is in your packet. And we would like to formally advertise for those accounting firms that would wish to do our accounting. I think this is a 5-year contract. Would probably be the most significant part of the contract. I don't think there's anything else. Charlie, do you recall if there's anything other than that?
Yes, sir.
Where is that in the package? Anybody know?
I'm looking.
Bill, let me address the, if you'll recall, today's motion really that was needed is just for approval to move forward with Ken reviewing the RFP. We haven't had attorney review of the final draft yet, so that's why we don't have it. So the motion just needs to be to acknowledge the RFP, request for Ken to do a final review, and then submit out for advertising.
But this approval will be to advertise
Yes.
for accounting services.
Yeah. But just also include attorney review.
We provided a standard template for accounting services. Mike Carter had helped us with it, and they were gonna get with Ken, to formally draft it to the specific language.
Any other questions from board members? So the motion needs to be authorizing the office to move forward with
Subject to
the process subject to attorney review. Okay, so we'll open for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Any other comments from the public? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll move on with the FloorCan contract.
At the last meeting, you had a set of bullets that have now been totally placed into contract language. FloorCan has not signed the agreement, but they have signed off on the language in the agreement. And Ken is here to address any questions you may have.
I'm gonna, obviously, the legal description is not in there. That is just the lot that is being leased to them. I didn't have the lot number when we were running the final number. We'll plug that in there. Also, Bill, reminder, FloorCan pointed out to us that they do not manufacture fertilizer. That term is in there. They basically coat it. They take fertilizer that's already manufactured and apply a coating to it that time releases. So in that first page, we will delete the word manufacture.
I did have that discussion with them, and they concur that it is basically semantics. They understand they do not actually get in the chemical process of manufacturing fertilizer. That's precluded in the park, by the way, is the reason that's an issue.
Any questions from board members
About,
about the contract?
yeah, I think it ought to be explained. Let me see here.
That's what I was thinking. We've got a 12-page document here. If we could have maybe the highlights explained. I see 10 years.
Is this, go ahead.
Well, just the same thing.
Yeah, is this like PF Man, where they don't pay any rent for 36 months?
There is a period of time where they do not pay any rent.
Well, it says 36 months.
Not to exceed.
It depends on construction.
Well, see, that's confusing to me. I hate to get into these things. I don't like fussing with you. Well, I'd like to understand this thing,
I will be more than happy if you will come by my office
No,
and
no, we
explain
need
it
to, no,
to
we
you.
need to do it in here, Bill, in front of these people. Let me ask you this then.
Well, let me ask, we presented every bullet for the contract at the last meeting. The board approved those bullets. Those exact bullets have been put into contractual language.
All right, let me ask you this. I mean, I know these people are they're probably one of the most, I gotta pick the right word. I mean, they're stable. I mean, they've got a proven record of probably anybody that's come in here. So, I mean, they're legit in my opinion. And the 36 months really don't bother me that much because they are legit and they are going to make money. But I think we're kind of going in the wrong direction on some of these things, and I kind of wonder about why we didn't do this for Keyplex. But anyway, let me ask you this, Ken wrote this thing. Section 9, if I'm reading this thing right, under utilities, let's see if I can find it. Does it say that that if they're not if they're not paying rent, then we pay the utilities?
Lessee pays the utilities. Lessee is for it.
Okay, so whether they pay rent or not, they're gonna pay their own utilities.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't understand that. And let me see. I've got a note here, section 13. How does this correlate with section 2? And I may not even know what I'm asking. But I'm sure you can tell. Maybe it don't correlate with section 2.
The lease is for 10 years, Donald, and it starts, the way it's worded, it starts construction, they're expected to take possession in the first quarter of 2016.
Right.
Based on, I mean, that is when the lease term, the 10 years is supposed to start.
Right.
So what section 13 talks about is basically, section A talks about within 10 days of that happening, we're going to, I think we'll have a better idea. Section A talks about certifying the option purchase price. At that point in time, you know what it is that the IDA has into the building, right? It's completed,
Right.
they're moved in, and the whole calculation of the option price is tied to the IDA investment and, you know, that formula that appears over in section 2. Section B talks about within 10 days after they take possession, we're going to agree on what the actual start date of the lease term was. So when they move in, we're going to agree on a document, so we have something in writing saying they moved in on this date and that was the start date of the 10-year term, because we don't really know. It may be the
That's
summer
right.
of 2016 if there are delays of some kind or whatever.
I agree.
And then C talks about whatever month they move in, they're not paying rent, but there's credits that are applied throughout the term of the lease for having so many jobs and that. And it's just if they move in the middle of the month, they get credit for half the month. It's a pro rata thing.
Okay.
It's that simple. They're not gonna, I'd be shocked if they actually moved in on the first day of any given month. So
Okay.
that's talking about just using a pro rata application of how many days are in the month and when they move in the month.
All right, in section 21, there's something in there about a $1, an option of $1. What's that talking about?
That's the consideration for the option itself. That doesn't mean they buy it for $1. What that means is they gave it, we're assigning the consideration for the option, we're assigning $1 to it. Now, if you've ever heard, one of the legal arguments way back a long time ago was people would try to get out of agreements and they would say there was no consideration, so they'd say for $1. It's not atypical to see $1 assigned as the consideration for the option itself. The fact that they paid $1 to have this option to buy the property. That's not the option price. Two different things. There's a formula to calculate the option price in the agreement.
Okay. If nobody else has any questions about this, I'm gonna ask Bill something.
I just had one question, kind of piggybacking on what Donald was asking about the 36 months. Could we not, put something in there to define, after the certificate of occupancy is issued, or that would be the beginning of that 36-month term if construction is what prevents us from doing that?
could tie it to CO, Vanessa, but it's a very complicated deal for them on their end, because they're gonna be up and operating two places at once, really. Trying to close one down while they're simultaneously coming up on another site so they don't lose momentum. And they were concerned, we talked about that. Bill and I actually proffered that, tying it to the issuance of the CO. And they really didn't like that because they didn't know for certain that they were going to be ready to move in when we issue the CO, and didn't want to lose any of their 36 months that way. What Bill counter proffered to cover the IDA's expenses was that they basically agreed from CO, if I remember correctly, to pick up all of the IDA's property taxes that we start incurring. So if there's a year delay, it doesn't cost you out of pocket to own the building, sitting there paying property taxes while they're not in it.
And to escrow $100,000.
And when they sign this thing, they're putting $100,000 into a deposit, which is basically just a good faith if they breach under whatever performance obligations they have, that's forfeited.
I guess that's where direction I want to go with Bill, is that if PF Man and Floorcan rent is deferred for 36 months, now do we as a board pick up the taxes and the insurance for those 3 years?
They have to pay the rent and the tax amount. With PF Man, I feel kind of awkward, but I'm certain, I don't think the CO for that building will be issued until after the first of the year, which means we actually defer property taxes until 2015. So we should not have a property tax circumstance with them, regardless of with Floorcan, they will pay those expenses. So neither of those really make us vulnerable.
Okay, so even though the rent's deferred for 36 months, the taxes and insurance is not deferred. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
And we have the $100,000
Okay.
escrow if they
Okay.
default that we can use to fill that gap with. There's one other complex part of this contract that probably should be noted. Floorcan has been anxious to possibly advance pay their lease. So we had to decide the most fair and equitable way to give them credit for an advance payment of up to $2 million.
Okay.
After looking and discussing with various entities on the right way to do it, we used a 10-year treasury bill rate to discount their prepayment, which means that if they give us $2 million, we're going to give them the 10-year treasury rate credit using present value of $1 tables to calculate what that payment will be, which will be something less than $2 million, because we're going to have their money for having whatever number of years that it is.
Present value of future money.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I think you need to point out too, section 2, Donald, the last couple sentences there. The rent is not actually free for 36 months. It's deferred at their option. So to give them the freeing up some capital with the move and everything, they may elect to defer payment of the rent to start on the 37th month. But then you see the 3% language?
Yes.
We pick it back up with a 3% additional amount over the rest of the lease term. So they're just spreading out the first 3 years rent over the remaining term of the lease with a 3% penalty, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
IDA pick up an additional 3%. So they're just paying more rent for the rest of the lease term, but can elect to defer it for the first 36.
We also are penalizing them 3% if they choose to not accelerate payment.
Okay. All right. I'm done.
Any other questions from board members? If not, we'll open for a motion.
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Any public comment? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we will move into the budget amendments.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You should have it as an addendum to your packet, budget amendments for the general fund and the special revenue fund to bring those balances in line with what the actual was for fiscal year in 2013 for the auditor, so you're not out of compliance as far as what those budgeted items were. Per discussion with Tricia and the auditor, the fiscal year 2013 budget was her best guess at that time. Y'all have made some budget amendments in between then and now, but as we get to the final activity, these are the allocations that need to be made in order to get the budget in line with the actual activity for fiscal year in 2013. I can start with the special revenue fund. You have that in front of you. On Tech River, there is needs to be an additional $23,200 to fund improvements to that building for the new tenant. So that's shown as an increase, and also an increase below in an appropriation for capital outlay. To get that second tenant in there, Rapid Tech, beyond what was budgeted, there was an additional $23,200 of expenditures. On Continuum.
Wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Is that something that was approved by the board before it was done?
These are amendments. You know, I didn't go back and read all of the minutes from the.
Is that something you're supposed to do?
I mean, yes, sir, and we're
But
working.
you didn't do it.
I summarized all of the minutes, or all of the amendments that have been made with Christie's help. Did I read every minute word for word throughout the year? No, sir, not yet. I haven't, but we're getting to that point to get everything to the auditor. There is going to be a reconciliation between the fiscal year and 2013 budget and all of the amendments that have taken place. This is a summary of all of the amendments, and I can go over all of the amendments that have been made to the original budget that was posted online, in addition to these amendments that we're asking approval for today.
Well, I'm just curious if you follow what you're supposed to do and what you're getting paid to do, you know?
Well, I mean, I summarized them. Did I memorize the minutes? No, sir. But these, do I have?
I didn't ask you, did you memorize them? I just asked you, did you read everything and whether this board approved this $23,000?
No, sir, they didn't approve. That's why we're asking for an amendment, I would assume. That it went over a little bit on the allocation for the second tenant in that building.
All right.
Continuum, that is the October draw. The difference between a cash and accrual accounting for accrual purposes, we had to accrue what Continuum paid through 9/30 year end back into this audit and these financial statements. If you see note number 2 at the bottom, that additional increase in the budgeted appropriations will decrease what was budgeted for fiscal year end 14. And when we get done with the PF Man building and get through these 2013 amendments and get the auditor everything they need, we will have fiscal year end 14 budget amendments throughout the year to make sure you're in line each month, rather than trying to do all these at the end of the year. We came in and really had to learn your books and your accounting records, and from what Tricia had, and just, that's kind of why they're all being done right now. This first year, that won't happen again. They'll be done on a monthly basis. And finally, PFM, that is additional money, an additional appropriation that's needed for the PFM building. It's just an additional increase in budgeted appropriations for building construction costs on that PFM building in the special revenue fund.
What was that? What did they do for that money?
Those are just continued draws for Half Acre. That's through pay app number 9, which was paid in October and accrued back to September. There's gonna be pay app 10 and 11. I'm under the impression to complete the building when it comes in January. It's an additional construction cost in Half Acre.
I really don't like the words assume and stuff like that. You know, I think you need to know, not assume.
Yeah, I think we need a little bit of clarification, because I think that these items have been voted on by the board. They have not been voted on as budget amendments, and part of the process is that we would have to not only vote on approving the item, but also approve the budget amendments to the budget. So, you know, Sarah, maybe you can help clarify that process, or what this document is and what's expected with the budget amendments.
Okay. Well, as Charlie said, when we originally did
Our 2013 budget, we, along with Tricia, had to make our best guess, obviously. When you budget, that's what it is. We're now that we have Wicks Brown under contract, we're now doing the closeout for 2013. So at this point, he's been able to go back and take the budgeted items that were approved by the board for 2013 and true them up to exactly what activity ended up taking place for 2013. So we can pass it on to the auditor for this year. So we'll do a true up every year. You have a closeout at the end of every fiscal year. This is the first time that we'll be doing one with Wicks Brown, and subsequently the first time we're doing one with IDA period. So that's why it's a little bit new. But as he said, for 2014, instead of doing this all at the end of the fiscal year, we'll start doing these on a monthly basis so that you don't have amendments that come up at the closeout and you have a huge list of amendments and items that have to be changed in the budget. We'll do it on a monthly basis. If any amendments come up or any allocations change or need to be moved around, we'll take care of that at the board meeting. So essentially what you're doing today is taking the 2013 budget, truing it up to do the closeout reconciliation for the year, and taking what you approved in prior meetings for these items and approving the amendment. You have approved it to go into the budget, but we are also required to approve the amendments to actually show in the budget. You have to have two separate votes.
Yeah, and that's what I asked him, you know, just, I can't recall all this stuff that's happened, you know, and I understand the budget process, but when he should, what I want him to tell me is, this $23,200 was voted on this date by the board, and then the budget amendment was approved on this date or something. That's all, you know, just transparency, just let us, because I can't remember all this stuff.
Sure, definitely.
You know, I'm a senior citizen.
Well, at the end of the meeting, he will be going back to our office this afternoon for us to finish this up, and we will tie the minutes to these amendments, and because those do have to go to the auditor as well.
Very good.
So, but we'll be doing that this afternoon.
Very good.
Thank you for answering those questions. Any other questions from the board members?
This closeout, please, is that for all the programs or which one specifically? I must have missed.
the closeout is for the entire budget, so it would include every item that was in your 2013 budget.
It would include PF man?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just for the fiscal year 2013. There will be more expenditures for 2014 for that project because it's not completed yet.
And just for the budget?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Is that just for that one page? We're gonna do the other page now?
Yes, sir. And thank you for explaining that. Obviously, Sarah's a little bit better with words than I. I didn't mean that I hadn't read or summarized the budget amendments. I did not know when the board took action to do each of them, but I do have a summary of the dates of the amendments. I apologize for that. Are there any questions on the special revenue fund, what I've gone over?
I have a question. Can you be specific on PF Man, what we're talking about? As far as the budget is concerned.
Those were pay apps number 9 and number 10 to Half Acre Construction. Pay app number 10, which was paid in October, we bring, for September work, we bring that, and we also book in the 10% retainage on that contract as a payable.
Okay, in other words, that's for the building the building.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's capital outlay for the building.
Okay.
Let me just make a comment on that to maybe clarify a little bit. Again, when we did the 2013 budget, we budgeted a certain amount for PFM. So when he says the payout number 10 was paid out in October, they deferred it back to September to put it into the 2013 budget. We have to do an increase in amendment that's shown for 2013 because originally we did not have that in the budget. We had it carried over to 2014. So now we have to go back and actually defer the payment back to September to include in this fiscal year. We're not increasing the funds, we're moving it from one fiscal year to another to show that it was actually completed at this fiscal year. Does that make a little bit more sense?
It does.
Probably not, but I can't sit up here and say you're wrong. I'm not an accountant, believe me.
A lot of these amendments are just the difference between a cash basis, how the IDA has kept their books, and an accrual basis for GAAP, what the auditor needs to prepare the financial statements. These are basically accruing October payments back into September for work that was performed through 9/30/13.
Charlie, what formal action do you need?
Well, do you want to vote on the Mosaic fund separate of the?
Yes,
the-
two separate ones.
I guess we would have a vote to approve the Mosaic, the special revenue fund amendments as presented.
And then you'll move into discussing the general fund?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So any further discussion from the board on the special revenue fund? If not, we'll motion to approve the budget amendments.
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion from the board members? Any comments or questions from the public? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll move into general fund.
Over in general fund, at the top, there's gonna be a utilization of some of the fund balance carry forward, just for what the actual expenses came out to be. I'll come back to that. But the revenue increases were EDA grant proceeds for the Sheriff's Command Center of $100,000, which is netted out under appropriations under capital outlay with $100,000. The original budgeted amount for the EDA grant revenue and capital outlay for the Sheriff's Command Center were understated by $100,000. So basically, it's just EDA proceeds in, capital outlay out. PFM, and PFM had some change orders that they wanted to make that they agreed they would pay for on that building. So for fiscal year in 2013, PFM contributed $50,200 to that building, which is reflected and netted to zero under capital outlay. PFM building, $50,200. Fruit income and caretaking on the original budget was shown net. When the caretaker picks the fruit, they net out some of the expenses, pick and haul, etc. So we actually had to gross up that fruit income to actual, and then brought out some of the caretaking expenses there. So that was a net difference of $10,000, but the fruit income of $40 and the caretaking of $50. Professional fees were down 23,000. That's just how it was presented on the original fiscal year 13 budget and the categories we have for the auditor. So we decreased that, but increased accounting and audit 35,000.
What is property management fees?
Property management fees that decreased. I'm not sure why she had allocated so much to property management fees.
What is that? What is property management fees?
What we have it as is the management fee for the Terrell properties, which was more like $2,000 rather than $24,000.
I mean, I don't know what it is. Maybe, she can probably tell me what that is.
It is for the property we have a property manager for our rental properties.
Oh.
We don't handle that in-house.
Okay.
We have someone that manages those properties and collects the rent for us, and then they cut us a check for the rent every month.
Is that something we RFP or?
It's something that's been done since, I don't know, do you remember what year
Okay.
that started?
Donna, we got permission to do that in 2000, whenever we bought that property, and Jim C. Realty has been managing that property. To my knowledge, they're the only people in Hardee County that really manage rental properties in that manner. The fee is very minimal, and honestly, we have no trouble with it. If there's an issue with the property, they get it taken care of. If there's a vacancy, they have someone else that's ready to move in. Generally, they can do that because they handle most of the Mosaic properties. If the board would like us to RFP that, we certainly don't object to going back out and trying to find someone in the marketplace to do it. I think for the most part, they've been doing it for us as a service, but it would be a bit cumbersome for us to handle this. If you want us to, we will.
I just didn't know what it was.
That's what it is.
I guess I've seen it before, but just didn't register to ask. Okay.
Also in the category for property management fees, not only was that allocated when Tricia did the original budget, she allocated for the rental properties, but also for the IDA's management of, or the EDC's technical management of the Commerce Park for the IDA. Because, as you know, we're all employees of the EDC, but we conduct the IDA business. And since the IDA does not have a property owners association set up, the IDA has agreed over the years to continue to manage that and to take responsibility for those items. So the staff are the ones who are doing that property management. And so Tricia felt that it was necessary to show some type of appropriation of funds from the IDA to use for property management by the EDC. Now, we've never transferred any of that money as of yet, but to have it in the budget and have the ability to do that, we felt like it was necessary.
Okay.
So that's why it is, 22,000. But we overestimated, so obviously we didn't use that much, so we'll decrease it out of the budget to show what was actually used. So that's a good thing.
Just going on down, utilities increased $2,500 from budgeted. Insurance was $7,000 higher than budgeted. Repairs $200 higher. Advertising $800 higher. Property taxes $49,100 higher. We went over why the caretaking's up that much. And then we have some Tech River overhead increases of $9,600 and $7,000. And those are the general fund budget amendments that need to be made to get the budget in line with actual fiscal year in 2013.
When the insurance increases $7,000, do we just pay it, or do we go back out for bids, or what do? We just accept that and just say, okay, that's just the way it is, or what do we do there?
We certainly RFP anytime we have to acquire an additional insurance policy.
I understand that,
at
but
the-
if you get a huge increase,
Well, that would be if we're, and normally an increase would happen because we added an additional building to the insurance. In this case, PFM came on in January of, or not PFM, Tech River came on in January of 2013. So we
Okay.
now have to go back and true up the budget allocating for their insurance policy, which
Okay.
was
Okay.
RFP'd.
all right, if
and
you're adding a
everything.
building or
So,
something and it goes,
yeah.
yeah, I think we just need to know that. I mean, I wouldn't ask the question if I'd have known that.
Okay. Well, you did vote to approve the insurance policy. But I know this is a long time ago.
Well-
That's the problem.
Well,
So-
when he comes up here and says, well, it increased $7,000, just tell me why. Because hell, I don't remember all that and how
That's
much
why
it
I'm here.
was. Just say it increased because y'all added a building. Okay, then I'm fine with that.
And, you know, again, this is, I understand if there's some frustration because, again, we're doing these all at one time at the end of the fiscal year. And as Charlie said, from now on for 2014, we'll do them on a monthly basis. So hopefully it'll be a little bit fresher in your memories. You won't have to be digging to the back of your brain to remember something that happened in
Well, I
January of
wouldn't count on
2013. So, well, maybe except for you. So.
Right, Jill?
Okay, anything else on the general fund?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, any further discussion from the board?
I have a question, please. On this $50,000 that PFM paid from his end, what's that for?
There are a couple of items in the building that PFM decided that they wanted to do some upgrades on. In our original GMP for the building, for instance, we had budgeted out for carpet, tile, and VCT throughout the building. PFM decided that they wanted tile. We could not go in and pay for tile when our GMP originally only called for carpet, tile, and VCT. That was an added expense. So PFM decided, well, we really want the tile. We are willing to pay the increase in what that costs. So I had budgeted around $11,000 for the total. They paid the difference. There was also a sliding glass door or window that they wanted to put into their office when you first come into the building, kind of like you see in a doctor's office, the little sliding glass. We had not budgeted for that at all in the GMP. They wanted to put that in, so we agreed that if they wanted to put it in, they could pay for it. So they did. The other allocation that was increased, they decided that they wanted granite countertops. We had only budgeted for
Granite countertops?
Mhm. So they paid to have the granite countertops installed, because in our GMP, we had not budgeted for granite. And that was, those
These
were the
were all
items, so.
put out for bid so that anybody can bid on it, each and every item.
No, not the upgraders,
Not the upgrades.
The upgrades that the company
Yeah.
chose to do to the building were not part of our responsibility, so we did not rebid that.
Right.
Well, it should be. That
It
should be,
have
that
been
should be in the contract, that anytime something changes like that, the vendors need to have an opportunity to bid. That's a pet
How did
peeve
he
of
pick
mine.
the, how did he pick the
No, no,
people?
no.
But because you're not,
vendors-
because when the scope of work changes and the price goes higher, the vendors in Hardee County need to have an opportunity to bid.
Say that a little louder.
That, what you're doing is allowing PFM to pick the vendor and not the bidding process. That's my opinion.
I don't,
But it was their money.
yeah, I
It doesn't
don't,
matter.
I don't know how we
Ask 'em again.
have a
matter.
private, but if they're a private organization, I'm not sure that we legally have the right to force them to bid out.
Well, let's ask the
items.
attorney, he's back there.
Yes.
We're paying him good money.
Ken?
He looks like he's ready to answer.
I think you could do it either way. Donald, I became aware of the floor issue, I think after the additional materials arrived and all that. when the private money is going into it, anytime we're gonna expend public funds, it's to be bid. My personal opinion, not legal opinion, in a perfect world, you'd rebid everything and all that, but when you hold up the project by going out another 60, 90 days on something like a relatively small amount of money to the project, you compare the delay costs and against the benefit of rebidding it, and when the private company is paying for it, we're not talking about expenditure of public funds at that point.
Well-
And so vendors are given the opportunity up front, and, you know, the people that are gonna occupy the building wanna pay for it, they pay for it.
Well, I differ with you. I think that we're paying half acre to oversee the building. Well, it might be private money buying the stuff, but it's public money paying half acre to oversee the work being done.
That's true.
And it's not taking 60 or 90 days to get a bid. You just call up the 3 contractors who bid and say, hey, here's the deal. They want to do this, this, and this. Give us a bid on what it's going to cost to change it. And you give the other 2 bidders in Hardee County an opportunity to bid and have a chance to get the bid. That's what I'm saying.
It's never that simple as far as the timeliness that you're talking about. It's just not that simple.
Oh, yes, it is, Ken, come on. Anyway, that's my thoughts. It ought to be in the contract that if that happens, we're paying half acre with public money, and that's when it should, the bidding process should pick the vendor, not PF Man or anybody else. I'm not picking on PF Man. I just think the process is flawed.
Well, it probably is, because it's rare that a private entity would be incentivized at all to put private sector money in a public building. That's the unique circumstance.
Can I blame you?
Might as well.
Wow.
Be at my doorstep sooner or later.
Actually, the contract says that he can buy that building eventually, so he's investing in his own building as a private company.
And
The
what's
lease- the lease
what's
agreement.
why would we object to that? I mean, Keyplex ended up with $300,000 or $400,000 of their money in their building. No one said a word about it.
I've got no problem with him spending the money. I got problems with people in Hardee County that didn't get the opportunity to bid on a job, that's all.
And if it had been done with our project monies, we would have had a bid process.
But our
May I
project
say
money is
something?
part of the building.
Can we go
It's
through?
intertwined.
We will have public comment.
You can't
next to them.
separate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion on the budget amendments? If not, we will open for a motion on the general fund budget amendments.
These are things that have already been approved by the board previously. They're just put here in summary form.
That's correct.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Public comment?
The main point on whether the floor should have been rebid is, did PF pay for the entire floor, or did they pay for the difference? If any public funds were used, then it should have been rebid. Did they pay for the entire floor, did they pay for the difference?
I do not know. At the last meeting, I suggested I would call attention to this with the auditors, and we will let them decide whether it was done appropriately or not. I don't have another remedy.
Okay.
Any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we will move into our Commerce Park expansion.
Couple of points that I would like to have a little discussion on. In meeting with Kevin Denny and BJ Haney, the issue of the houses has come up, and the zoning type that we are going to be requesting for the addition to the park precludes housing. However, we can grandfather the housing in and leave it there until such time that the board decides that they want the housing torn down. And they will give us in writing permission to do maintenance to the houses, but no improvements. And I want to find out from the board if anyone objects to proceeding along those timelines, or proceeding along that logic line, that we would leave the houses until such time that we determined that they were encumbering the development of the park.
Are they costing us money?
No.
Until it gets to the point where it's costing us money to keep them, then I'd say, you know, I think we ought to do that.
So we can
Probably
move-
people living in them things, and, you know,
We will move forward then with our zoning request as it's developed, that will acknowledge that there are two existing non-conforming
Yeah.
uses on the property. Okay. just-
till it gets to the point where it's costing us money to keep them up, and then we need to, we need to stop that. We don't need to be, if it's costing us $2,000 or $3,000 a year extra than what we're getting in to pay, to keep them up, then we need to stop that.
And
Just like the groves, when it gets to the groves costing us money, then we need to get rid of, pull the trees.
understand.
You concur?
I concur.
Can I proffer that?
You proffer it, I accept it. The second issue is how we deal with the water and sewer. We need to work with the BOCC to probably extend water and sewer and tie the loops in around to Rainey, which is the double drive road in Wauchula Hills. I'm not certain the IDA should pay for all of those other improvements. We have to figure out a funding mechanism, but tying and looping all of that together appears to be the most logical way to deal with both water and sewer. And the design through the park gets us to within a half a mile of the BOCC's water and sewer lines. So I need some advice from the board on how they would like us to integrate the addition of the park into the county's existing water and sewer system in Wauchula Hills. Do I need to repeat that for anyone?
No, what is the county's outlook on future money from the state to continue that Wauchula Hills project? And would coming down Rainey be a part of that?
Zero.
Their yearly, the money they get yearly from the state.
We don't get money yearly from the state.
Oh, you don't?
No, there was a $500,000 that was in the budget this past year that the governor just X'd. So it
Okay,
didn't
you
happen.
just apply for it, but that don't mean you necessarily
We
get
apply
it.
for money every year and haven't gotten any in a while.
Okay.
Do we have any idea how much money we're talking about, what the cost might be?
At this point, we don't. The plans that we are drawing through the park will basically give us an ability to RFP for those costs. But whether or not they're totally borne by the IDA or we do have money in the corridor development that may qualify. It just depends on the philosophy of EDA, IDA, BOCC, however you want to do it.
Well, when is it critical that we tie to that? Because right now, we can just take off from where we are now and go south before it's tied in from the south to here, can't we? I mean, how
You
critical-
can, but when you deadhead
I understand.
water lines,
I understand that.
it becomes a bit of an issue.
I agree, but how long is it gonna be before we get a building actually built up there? 3 years?
I don't know.
You can't predict the future?
I could try. I'll proffer predicting the future if you'll accept it.
Well, I think we ought to go ahead and get the infrastructure from the north down to the south inside the park and worry about that other later. Let Mike and the commissioners pay for that. I'm not for that.
Have you had any conversations with Park about how it would engineer out yet at all?
I have spoken to the engineers, and the engineers have spoken to Park. I have spoken briefly to Lex, and I don't think anyone objects to it, but I can see where, if we're gonna proceed down this path, we need to have a clear understanding of costs and benefits.
I agree.
So,
I mean,
Is that something that
needs to be done.
EDA might help with too?
possibly.
Other cities have applied for similar, I mean, but I'm sure that this project is probably on a lot larger scale than what has been applied for in the past.
Yeah, it kind of concerns me if I remember right, when Park says, there's some lady right there on the corner, I guess in that red brick house that wants water and sewer. And 1 block away is the line, and he says it's gonna cost $100,000 just to go that 1 block to tie that lady in on the corner there. So you're talking about a half a mile, my God, you're talking about $4 or $5 million to go down there. I mean, that's what concerns me, if I remember right.
Does he remember right?
I don't expect it to be that much.
I think a lot of the cost with that though is the tying in on both sides and not necessarily the.
It might be, but still, you're gonna have the same deal.
I mean, it could, I think not knowing the cost is a big, I mean, that's a big factor. We would probably need to.
Cause when you get down Old Brandon Road, and at some point, there's gonna be a tie back to the north, to our park, if there's some kind of a real expensive tie-in pipe or something, then, you know, that's what runs it up.
The size of the lines, whether they're force mains or lift stations, all that has to be taken into consideration, and we will be gathering those costs together. I just kind of wanted everyone to understand that, you know, at some point, if we're going to do what appears to be logical, we're gonna have to decide how to divvy up the costs.
Oh, I agree.
Related to it.
It's very logical. I just would think we ought to concentrate right now on coming from the north to the south, inside the park, and get the water and sewer and fire lines in there.
Don, a lot of the cost incurred in the water and sewer in Wauchula Hills is, I'd say a lot, a good bit of it anyway, has been road work that has to go along with it. So, and I don't know if you're talking about tying in and what the route would be, and I don't know what roads would be affected. It's probably premature to make any kind of decision, but probably more information's needed at this point.
And similarly, it's a totally different issue, but it does involve the same set of circumstances. Mike and I had a couple of discussions back earlier in the year about how we could modify these chambers and how we should share the costs so that they would be more appropriately set up for IDA members and meetings and commission meetings, enhancing the sound system, video system, et cetera. And we also need to have some dialogue relative to whether or not the board wants to pursue that in conjunction with the BOCC. It's another shared circumstance, and if so, how we do it.
Oh, I agree totally with what you're saying. It needs to be tied in and all that, but I think we ought to concentrate on inside the park and then work on coming from the south to the north of the tie-in, but concentrate on getting it in there.
But the getting it in is what's the problem. I mean, we have to size it so that it can do the tie-in.
Well, that's what Hunter Engineering does.
Yes.
And we've already agreed to
we're-
move forward with that.
But the design, if the design is going to be done with the intent of tying into the county, all I want to make certain is that everyone understands that we're going to proceed that way, which may even have increased costs for the IDA, whether we tie it together off our property or not.
Right.
So,
if you know, and I'm not an engineer either, like I'm not an accountant. You know, you found that out. But as we move south inside the park, if the pipes and all have to be larger as we go south, then I understand that, if that's what has to be done as you know, and it's gonna cost more, if that's what has to be done. I would doubt that the pipes would be smaller as we go north, south, because we're gonna tie in and come back. In case there's a break, then they can cut some valves off and move it from south to north. That way, we won't lose water to those buildings in the park. Is that what that's the reason for this, right?
Yes, but I'm not certain we can design and not have the tie-in.
You gotta have the tie-in.
Well, I think we can design.
It's just like a
we can
power line,
design-
you gotta have a loop feed.
We can design as an extension that will stand alone, or we can design with a tie-in. I'm not certain there's a way to do both.
Sure there is.
Well, I'm not an engineer.
Well, I'm not either, but my God,
We will.
we'll be able to do anything we want in this country.
No, but you think the
Again.
logic would be that if at some point in the future, we're gonna have to have a tie-in, whether
Yes.
it's 1 year, 4 years, 6 years.
And we
why
engineer
would we
for
not
it.
do it? Yeah.
I agree. I understand that, and you do, but I'm not sure Bill does.
Probably don't.
All right.
I think you're concerned with the pay, and how do we divvy up who's paying on what? I think is what you're concerned about.
Well, what I would like everyone, I don't want anyone to be blindsided or caught off guard if there are additional costs to the IDA or the BOCC to do this design so that it accommodates the best way to engineer the system.
Well, I thought we'd already approved Hunter Engineer doing that.
For the park.
That was
Yeah, for the
For the
park.
park.
But we're not gonna pay for outside the park, are we, the engineering?
That's the.
Oh,
The
is that what
the
we're
issue has
talking
come
about?
up, the issue has come up that the design of the water lines and sewer lines in the park should probably take into consideration
Yes.
tying in
Yes.
to the county.
Yes. But I think now what you're getting to is that you want us to pay for the engineering outside the park, for the county's part of this
I
thing.
don't think those costs are, they're not significant. The construction would be significant, mainly in the park. I will let you know.
Well, let's concentrate on inside the park with doing the engineering for the loop.
And acknowledging that
Yes.
whatever we do inside the
Yes.
park is going to be done with an ability to tie into the loop.
Yes.
Which will result
Yes.
in increased costs.
That's the most reasonable thing to do,
Okay, well, that,
in my opinion.
we will proceed along those lines, and we have had this discussion. And I will be back to you with additional information.
That's transparency.
And if we build it right, it'll be accountability.
Yes.
Okay.
It's amazing we can agree sometimes.
Scary.
It is.
The culvert crossing is moving along nicely. I don't really have a construction timeline on that, but, you know, the whole purpose has been to get the culvert in and then begin excavating for the retention pond, which will give us more than adequate fill for Florican. And I'm trying to do all this and coordinate it so that we don't have to double handle the excavation and moving of dirt. So all that seems to be working very well. Any other questions on the
How
Commerce
big is
Park?
that building? 800,000, 80,000?
80.
80.
Any other questions on Commerce Park? Okay.
You're not looking for any action, that's more of an update?
No, just an update.
Okay, we'll take a brief break. Let's return in 10 minutes, and that will allow time for continuing labs to set up for their report.